Hey, super scientist. We're looking at Micro 4, and we're going to be talking about pathogens and how they can impact your health, and also how infectious diseases can be prevented or can be treated. Infectious diseases are going to be those diseases that can be contagious. They're going to be diseases that can spread from one organism to another, or can be spread through a contaminated object or an environmental source. So an infectious disease is going to be caused by the presence of a pathogen, a disease-causing substance in the body. There are a couple different images here that show you some different ways of transmission. So an infected animal is going to be called a biological vector. Mosquito, tick are some examples. Contaminated water can cause you to obtain a lot of different types of pathogens. Being in contact with someone who is contagious, who is infected with a particular disease, and also touching an object that someone has recently touched that may have sneezed in their hand or something like that. So borrowing a pencil, drinking after someone, using the same cup, using the same utensil, touching a doorknob, that sort of thing. So how are infectious diseases spread? This chart is going to show us a couple different methods. So the different sources. One source is infected person, so being in contact with an infected person. Direct contact, like shaking hands, is an example. And indirect contact also, like sneezing. When you sneeze, a lot of droplets go into the air, and another person might breathe that in. So those droplets are generally going to be smaller and held in the air for a while. Examples of ways that this disease can spread. So cold sores, that's one example of a disease spread by direct contact. The flu, also coronavirus can be spread by infected people as well. So those are just a few examples. Contaminated object. So a contaminated object might be a cup, eating utensils, so something that someone has used that is infected, and then you in turn use that object, whether you know that you're using that object that's contaminated or not. An animal bite from an infected animal is going to be another way infectious disease can spread. Rabies is an example, as well as Lyme disease. So the animal that is infected that transmits a pathogen is going to be called a biological vector. So rabies is a virus, and it's transmitted through a bite of a mammal that has the rabies virus in its body. Lyme disease is another example. Lyme disease is transmitted through the bite of a tick. Soil, food, water, and air, those are all environmental sources, and contact with those pathogens that are in contaminated soil, food, water, and air could cause you to get an infectious disease as well. Salmonella is a bacteria. It is in food sometimes, so food that is contaminated with the Salmonella or Clostridium botulinum bacteria will cause you to take that pathogen into your body, and then you'll get sick as a result. So how are bacterial diseases treated? Bacterial diseases are going to be treated by antibiotics. So an antibiotic is going to be a chemical that can kill bacteria without harming the person's cells. So the antibiotic is specifically going to be targeting bacteria, and generally it's going to target the peptidoglycan, which is in the cell wall of the bacteria. So if you get strep throat and you go to the doctor will prescribe something like penicillin or amoxicillin, and those are antibiotics. One thing that happens with antibiotics is that in the past they have been overprescribed, or people will take an antibiotic for something that is a viral disease, and so bacteria may become resistant. And if a bacteria becomes resistant, that means that it is no longer going to be killed in the presence of those antibiotics. MRSA, MRSA, is one disease that is antibiotic resistant. How do you treat viral diseases? Well, diseases that are caused by viruses just have to run their course. So you need to get plenty of rest and drink lots of fluids and eat healthy. So vaccines are one way that you can prevent from getting diseases. Vaccines are usually going to be targeting viral diseases, although there are a few vaccines that are for bacterial diseases. One question here, why do doctors recommend that people get the flu vaccine every year? Well, that's because of mutations. So diseases that are caused by viruses can change frequently, and that's because viruses can mutate really quickly. So the flu virus is one of those examples that can mutate really quickly. So antibiotic resistance, we were just talking about this. So this is going to happen when bacteria change, bacteria evolve, they mutate so that they are super strong bacteria. They are able to live in the presence of antibiotics when traditionally antibiotics would have killed the bacteria. And this picture is showing this to you. So the resistant bacteria here, we only have 2 red circles that are resistant. The rest of these yellow circles are bacteria that will be killed in the presence of antibiotics. So after several generations of these bacteria, we end up with a bunch of red circles. So the bacteria that are resistant have become dominant because they have been able to pass on their DNA